The other point, I think, if there are 2 points in the book I was trying to make, is which also came up in Tony's presentation, is the issue about really talking about the real things that are of importance. That could apply. I mean, there's a temptation among economists sometimes to try to technicalize a subject as much as possible. I was amused when Tony referred to concavity being a very central thing. And I remember being asked in one of my classes in London School of Economics in the early 70s that since equality could be thought to be arising from the concavity of the welfare function, would it have been a better slogan to talk about liberty, concavity, and fraternity? And I think it would not have been, partly because it isn't what we are really concerned with. If it is the case concavity yields that, well then concavity becomes important for the reason that it yields that, and therefore what it is that it yields is what we ought to look at. Now this question is often important, and I take the opportunity of seizing the few minutes that that have been given to talk on the really important issue that Tony was discussing, namely the sudden choice of austerity that has come as a kind of moral virtue. It's a kind of masochistic virtue, of course, deeply, that I remember always in Bernard Shaw's Man and Superman, I think it's Anne explaining to Richard that an Englishman never feels he is moral unless he is uncomfortable. So I think this whole idea of, the reverse too, that if you're really uncomfortable, then it must be the moral thing to do. And I think this is one case where that view of austerity is absolutely dead wrong. It's dead wrong in all kinds of ways, even if you think about the particular example, say, of child benefits you're talking about. And one side, Tony quite rightly pointed out, and it's something which I would very much in sympathy with, and though I haven't written on that subject, if I were to write it, I would have gone with Tony, that one would have to ask that how would we deal with the option of providing these benefits for children, or increasing taxes on all or some people in order to pay for it, and it's fairly straightforward. But the fact is also that any money that you spend on child benefit is almost certainly likely to be spent, which is exactly what you're looking for at a time when you're trying to stimulate an economy, as opposed to giving away things where you don't know what would happen to the money. So it's we're living in one of those odd moments when austerity is not only dreadful from the point of view of human well-being, capability, freedom, happiness, whichever index you take, it's not only something that could be criticized on grounds of inequality and injustice because of the fact that the austerity falls so much on people who are unemployed and who don't have the basic opportunities in life. But it's also one of those cases that when austerity is also terribly bad for overall expansion of the economy. Now this came up this morning. I was being interviewed by a very friendly and very knowledgeable journalist of a daily newspaper here, and about my attitude to growth, and would I agree with Robert Skidelsky, with whom I very often agree, that one of the reasons for thinking that the present world attitude is short of morality is because we concentrate on growth as opposed to other things which are valuable. Now I agree half with that, because we have to concentrate on other things. But whether growth is in favor of other things or not really depends on what situation we are in. I would think that, even though I've written often in the past, that we have made a fetish of growth rather than looking at human well-being, I would love Europe to do a little bit more growth and America to a little bit more growth, because the real issue that if growth isn't important, it isn't that it's bad. It's that it's important depends on what it will do. And right now, having more growth, creating more employment, generating the economy, will do an enormous amount for well-being, capability, or anything else. So to say that rather than growth would be a mistake, because there could be no such attitude as rather than growth. You have to concentrate on what really matters, and sometimes growth comes out in that direction, sometimes it doesn't. And then we have to distinguish on that basis. And I personally think, and I'm on record in The Guardian, in the La Repubblica, and in the Le Monde, that I think that Europe takes growth unduly, neglects growth unduly much, doesn't recognize that this is not a moment to worry so much about, in the short run, about the public debt issue. You need a plan in the long run for that, certainly. But the art of economics is not only what to do, but when to do it. And right now, I think generating growth would be an enormously positive thing. And the fact that it might give you child benefit also does not reduce its appeal. It's a further reason for thinking in this line. But I think the main issue that I would want to emphasize, and it came out so clearly in Tony Atkinson's presentation, is that we have to be concerned with what is it that we think are really important and how we might pursue it, and how growth would figure on it, how public debt will figure on it, how deficit will figure on it, are all secondary, derivative. How it will affect those things which we really think are enormously important. And I will end with just, well, I'll make two more points actually quickly. One is that one is continuing on that line, the attitude towards government, because I think if you think about the present crisis, there's something extraordinarily difficult to explain. In 2008, we were hit by a crisis. People went on denying the real causation of the crisis, though Adam Smith would have no difficulty understanding it, since he talked about it exactly that, as I discussed I think in a speech in Cornell first, but in an article in the New York Review, that you could, an unrestrained market could produce an absolute disaster if the government doesn't play its part in restraining it, which is why he was, unlike Jeremy Bentham, in favor of anti-usury law and so forth. But of course, it was created by a market failure, market giving wrong signal, giving a sense of opulence which wasn't there, because the financial sector later made a lot of money. It indicated as if it's very productive, which is not the case. But from there we have now, you see, then how did the scenario proceed? In order to save the world, you had to bring in a package of stimulation. That, of course, made huge public debt. And that left to a situation when there was the government owing a lot of money. And then people turned around and said that the problem really is the government is too big. You get the Tea Party, you get a whole rhetoric change. This is the government expanding itself in order to save the economy from a crisis created by a market failure, but ending up in this situation saying as if the government was the cause of the problem, rather than the rescuer, but which in the process got caught in this peculiarly uncomfortable net. So I think, again, the issue has to be, I'm not intrinsically pro-government or anti-government. I've been a long time since I come from the left of the political spectrum, going back to my 60s days, argued that in some ways the socialist economists at that time, including the communist economists, haven't really figured out the role of what the government can do and what the government can't do. And very often I would like them to give much greater role to the market economy on grounds, not because the market itself is good, but in terms of what I value, that would be the right direction to go. But the situation today is one in which the government can play an enormously big role, enormously positive role, and they're being unable to play it because they are in a situation, they're stuck in a way by the rhetoric of the situation. And the government being too big a government, too much deficit, how are we going to ruin, are we ruining the future generations? What can we do to save the future generations from our overspending and so forth? The entire rhetoric has changed because we are not concentrating on the really important thing. I mean, if there's any role to things like capability and human development, it comes from the fact that it is human development is concerned with what we really think are important. Capability is part of that story. I don't think it's all of that story, but part of that story. So I must say, for me, it's a enormously pleasing, touching, moving occasion to be here, to hear my friend and someone I admire so tremendously, Tony Atkinson, give this first lecture. And I thank everybody who came here. There's so many of my friends, collaborators, students, inspirers, and fellow conspirators here. So I think I'm really most touched, but most of all, of course, is to Tony Atkinson for a totally wonderful speech. Thank you very much.